We continue now at the top of Daf Nun Vav Amud Aleph in Meseches Nedarim. This is Nedarim Daf 56a. The Mishnah says, "Hanoder min habayis." If somebody makes a neder not to go into the house, mutter bali. It's mutter for him to go into the upper story of the house. Divrei Rabbi Meir. This is the opinion of Rabbi Meir. The Chachamim omrim, and the Chachamim say aliyah bichlal habayis. The upper story of the house is included in the house. You make a neder from the house, it includes the upper story. Hanoder minhu aliyah. Now, if somebody makes a neder from the upper story of the house, mutter b'bayis. It is mutter for him to go into the house itself. And the Gemara says, "Mana Tana." Who is the Tana who says bebeis l'rabos hasayitzia, bebeis l'rabos hasaliyah? This is talking about the pasuk by Tzaras. It says bebeis eretz achuzaschem, and the Tana over here in the Brisa says that the word bebeis comes to include the yitzia, which is like the gallery of the house, and the word bebeis also comes to include the aliyah, which is the upper story. Now, some people do change the girsa. Instead of having yitzia, they have tzavua, that it's a house that has colors. But in either case, who's the Tana who says that bebeis is l'rabos esualiyah, to include the upper story? Amar Rav Chisda says, Rabbi Meir, the Tana of that Brisa is Rabbi Meir in our Mishnah. The Rabbanan, because if it was the Rabbanan, ha'ami Rabbanan, aliyah bichlal habayis. The Rabbanan already say in our Mishnah that the upper story is included in the house. So lamali kra bebeis l'ribuya. What would we need the pasuk of bebeis to include the aliyah? It should already be included according to the Chachamim in our Mishnah. So it must be that Brisa by Tzaras is Rabbi Meir. And the Gemara continues, Abaya says, Afilu Tema Rabbanan. You could even say that the Brisa, which uses the word beveis by Tzaras, beveis eretz achuzaschem, to include the aliyah, could even be the Rabbanan in our Mishnah. And still, boyikra, still a pasuk is required to include the aliyah, even though in our Mishnah the aliyah is included in the bias automatically. The Salgadai Dechamina, because one might have thought, beveis eretz achuzaschem ksiv. The pasuk says, in the house of eretz achuzaschem, the land of your possession, it uses the word eretz over there, and I would have thought the mechaber ba'ara shmei bias, if it's attached to the ground, the land, that's called bias. And aliyah, halo mechaber ba'ara, the aliyah, the upper story, is not attached to the land. It's not attached to the ground, and that's why the extra word beveis is needed. Beveis teaches us even the aliyah. And the Gemara continues, Keman ozla hada amar Rav Huna bar Chia mishmei de'ula. Who does the following statement of Rav Huna bar Chia in the name of Ula, who does it follow? It says, Bayis beveisi ani mocher lach. Let's say a person says, a house, in my house I'm selling you. So mareyu aliyah, he can show him, the seller can show the buyer, the upper story. That's what he meant by bayis beveisi. And so the Gemara says, Taima do amar le bayis shebebeisi ani mocherlach. The only reason that it included the aliyah, or it meant the aliyah, was because he phrased it as bayis shebebeisi. Aval bayis stam eino mareu aliyah. But it sounds like if he just would have said bayis, he can't show him an upper story, because upper story is not automatically included in bayis. And so the Gemara says, Lema Rabbi Meir, let us say that this is Rabbi Meir. In other words, Rabbi Meir is the one who says that generally bias does not include an aliyah. And the Gemara says, no, afilu temer Rabbanan. You could even say it's the Rabbanan. My aliyah ma'ula shebebatim. What does it mean, aliyah? It means the best, the choicest of his houses. In other words, when it says, bayis beveisi ani mocherlach, you could show him an aliyah, it means you show him the best of your houses. That's what you meant by that phrase. And the Mefarish explains, ma'ula shebenechasav, the best of his property, habayis hameshubach shebebeisav tzarech litein lo. He has to give him the house that is the best, the choicest of his houses. Heichad dekamar bayis beveisi. If he says that phrase, bayis beveisi. Avaliya v'amar bayis tam, but had he said bayis tam, hayachol laharos lo aliyah, could be that he is allowed to show him the upper story, mamish da aliyah bechlal bayis, because the aliyah is included in the bayis. And the Gemara continues with the Mishnah, Hanoder min hamita, if someone takes a neder not to use the bed, mutter bedargish, he's allowed to use the dargish. The Gemara will explain what a dargish is. Divrei Rabbi Meir, that's the opinion of Rabbi Meir. The Chachamim say, no, dargish bechlal mita, dargish is included in the term mita, and the dargish is also prohibited. Hanoder min hadargish, now if somebody makes a neder not to use the dargish, so then everybody agrees mutter b'mita, it's mutter for him to use the mita, it's mutter to use the bed. And the Gemara says, my dargish, what is a dargish? Amar Ula says, arsa degada, it is a bed of good fortune. The Mefarish over here says, arsa degada mita she'orchen osal lemazal. They used to have a bed that they would arrange just for good fortune. Ve'in shamadam yashin oleh. Nobody would sleep on it, so that's the machlokas in the Mishnah, whether that's included when a person is a noder min amita, when the person takes a neder not to use the bed. Amrulei Rabbanan le'ula. So the Rabbanan said to Ula, Haditanan, that which we learned in the Mishnah. Kishein Mavrin Oso, when they would visit him, this is talking about, the Mefarish says, Kishein Mavrin Oso le'kohen gadol kishuava. They would visit the Kohen Gadol when he was a mourner, although some change it to the Melech, when they would visit the Melech, the king, when he was in mourning. So they would visit him, Kala the entire nation, Mesuban ala aretz. Everybody would sit on the ground. V'hu meisav ala dargish, and he would sit on the dargish. So now the Gemara asks, Kula shasa lo yasav Allah. The whole year you don't use the dargish; it's just there for mazel. And ahu yoma yasav Allah. And that day he's going to sit on it. That doesn't make sense. You can't say that a dargish is an arsa degada and suddenly they're using it at a time of mourning. But the Gemara says, why is that difficult? Maskif lo Ravina. Ravina asked on that and said as follows: what is the problem with that? Midi dahavi abasar v'yayin. It's similar to how we treat meat and wine when a person is in mourning. Tekula shasa iboy achel v'iboy lo achel. The whole year, if a person wants to eat it, he could eat it. If he doesn't want to eat it, he doesn't eat it. Hahu yoma. But that particular day when the person is in mourning, anon yavinan le, we actually give it to him. We give him the meat and wine. So you see that we act different on that occasion. And so the same thing might be true by the dargish. Ella but hakasha. The following is difficult. If you're going to explain dargish in this fashion, that it's arsa degada, that it's a bed of good fortune, so the following is difficult. The Tanya, as we learned in a brisa, dargish, when it comes to the dargish, lo haya kofeu, even though you would overturn when a person's in mourning, they overturn the beds of the house, but they don't overturn the dargish, ella zokfo. Rather what they do is, they stand it up. The Mefarish says, lo haya kofeu mamish hakarai milmala, they don't put the legs on top, turn it upside down, ella zokfo shemamidu al shnei krav v'dayo, they stand it up on its two legs, and that is good enough. So that's what the Brisa says, again, regarding the dargish. V'amrit arsa degado, and if you're going to say a dargish is arsa degada, and the Mefarish over here says, V'amrit arsa degada de mita chashuvi, that it's considered like a mita, and it's a chash of mita, kol kach amai ein tzarech lechafosa. So if that's the case, so why don't you need to overturn it? On the contrary, it should be like every other bed that needs to be overturned at the time of mourning. V'amrit arsa degada, the Gemara says, if you say that it's an arsa degada, v'atanya, but we learned in the Brisa, hakofa mitaso lo mitaso belvado kofa, the person who has to overturn his bed, it's not only his bed that he overturns, elakol mitos sheyesh lo b'soch habayis kofa, all the beds that are in the house he has to turn upside down. The Mefarish says, v'atanya v'zunami ho'elu mita chashuva, since this is an important mita, tzarech lechafosi, you should need to overturn it. Elashma mina dargish lava arsa degada. You see from here that the dargish rather is not the arsa degada. And the Gemara answers to that, Holo Kasha, that's not difficult either. And we'll continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Nun Vav Amud Beis.